In just 29 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actors went from calm and collected to absolutely furious, throwing his microphone down and storming off the Loose Women set after Janet Street Porter pushed him too far with a series of nasty personal attacks that left the entire studio in complete shock. Before we get into this absolute car crash of an interview, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing Britain's darkest scandals, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Last night's episode of Loose Women was supposed to be a celebration. Michael Caine, the legendary actor with a career spanning over 6 decades, was there to talk about his latest book and share some stories from his incredible life. The audience was packed, the atmosphere was buzzing, and everyone was excited to hear from the man himself. But what started as a friendly chat quickly turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in British television history. Michael walked onto the set to massive applause, waving to the crowd with that famous smile of his. He was wearing a smart navy suit, looking sharp as always, and he seemed genuinely happy to be there. Janet Street Porter was sitting at the panel, and from the moment Michael sat down, something felt off. While the other hosts were warm and welcoming, Janet had this look on her face, like she was ready to pounce. The interview started pleasantly enough. One of the other panelists asked Michael about his new book, and he launched into a charming story about his early days in acting. He talked about struggling to make ends meet, sleeping on friends' couches, and taking any job he could get. The audience was hanging on his every word, laughing at his jokes and applauding his honesty. But then Janet jumped in. "Let me stop you right there, Michael," she said, cutting him off mid-sentence. Her tone was sharp, not friendly at all. "You've told these same stories a million times. Don't you think people are tired of hearing about how tough you had it? We get it. You were poor once. So was everyone else back then." The studio went quiet. You could feel the tension immediately. The other panelists looked uncomfortable, exchanging nervous glances. Michael paused, clearly taken aback by Janet's rudeness, but being the professional he is, he tried to laugh it off. "Well, Janet, people keep asking, so I keep telling them," he said with a smile, though you could tell he was a bit thrown. "But if you'd rather talk about something else, I'm happy to." Janet wasn't backing down, though. She leaned forward, her arms crossed, and said, "What I'd rather do is get some honest answers for once, instead of the same rehearsed nonsense you trot out on every chat show. You're 91 years old. Surely you've got something more interesting to say than stories from 60 years ago." The audience gasped. A few people even booed. This wasn't friendly banter. This was just plain rude. One of the other hosts tried to step in and change the subject, asking Michael about working with some famous directors. But Janet wasn't having it. No. Let me finish," Janet snapped at her colleague. "I want to know why Michael here thinks he's so special, that he can coast on his old stories, while younger actors are out there actually working hard and creating new content." Michael's expression changed. The friendly smile was gone, replaced by a look of genuine confusion and hurt. "I'm sorry, Janet, but I don't understand what you're getting at. I came here to have a nice conversation, not to be attacked." "Attacked?" Janet scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please. If you can't handle a few hard questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. This is exactly what I'm talking about, you lot from your generation. You think everyone should just bow down and worship you because you made a few good films decades ago." The other panelists were visibly uncomfortable now, trying desperately to steer the conversation in a different direction. But Janet kept going. "And another thing," she continued, pointing her finger at Michael, "you've made some pretty questionable comments about women over the years. Care to address those? Or are we just going to pretend that never happened?" Michael sat up straighter in his chair. "What comments are you referring to?" he asked, his voice steady, but you could hear the anger starting to build underneath. "Oh, don't play dumb," Janet shot back. "The things you've said about actresses, about their looks, about age. You've benefited from a system that treats women like rubbish, while men like you get to work until you're 100 years old. When was the last time you used your platform to actually stand up for women in the industry?" "Now hold on a minute," Michael said, his voice getting louder. "That's completely unfair, and you know it. I've worked with incredible women throughout my entire career, and I've always treated everyone with respect. I won't sit here and be accused of things I haven't done. But Janet was on a roll now, and she wasn't stopping. Respect? Is that what you call it? How many films have you done where the leading lady was 30 years younger than you? How many times have you played the romantic lead opposite women young enough to be your daughter, and you never once questioned that? The audience was getting restless. Some people were shouting at Janet to stop. Others were cheering her on. It was chaos. Michael was shaking his head, clearly trying to keep his composure, but you could see he was reaching his breaking point. Those decisions weren't mine to make, Michael said through gritted teeth. I'm an actor. I don't cast the films. I don't write them. I show up and do my job to the best of my ability. If you have a problem with the industry, take it up with the people who actually make those decisions, not with me. But you benefit from it, Janet shouted, her voice getting shriller. You benefit from a sexist, ageist system, and you've never once spoken out against it. You just take the money and run, don't you? One of the other hosts, looking absolutely mortified, tried to intervene again. Janet, I think maybe we should... Stay out of this, Janet snapped at her. I'm asking Michael a legitimate question, and he's dodging it like he always does. Michael's face was red now. His hands were gripping the arms of his chair. I am not dodging anything. You're making accusations without any basis, and frankly, I find it insulting. I've spent my entire life working hard and treating people decently. I don't deserve this. Oh, you don't deserve this? Janet mocked him, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Poor Michael Caine, getting asked a few tough questions. How will you ever survive? Maybe if you spent less time feeling sorry for yourself and more time actually listening to what women have been saying about the industry for years, you'd understand why people are fed up with people like you. People like me? Michael repeated, his voice dangerously quiet now. What exactly do you mean by that? I mean old rich white men who think they're untouchable, Janet said bluntly. Men who've had everything handed to them on a silver platter and then act like they've struggled. You want to talk about struggle? Talk to women who've been pushed out of the industry at 40. Talk to actresses who've been harassed and abused. Talk to people who actually face real discrimination, not just someone asking you a few uncomfortable questions on a talk show. The studio was in uproar now. Half the audience was booing Janet, the other half was clapping. The other panelists looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. And Michael looked like he was about to explode. That is enough, he said, standing up from his chair. I came here in good faith to have a conversation, and you've done nothing but attack me from the moment I sat down. You don't know me, you don't know what I've been through, and you certainly don't have the right to sit there and judge me like this. But Janet wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by his anger. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, she said, gesturing at him wildly. The minute someone challenges you, you fall apart. You can dish it out, but you can't take it, can you? Dish it out? Michael's voice was rising now. I haven't dished out anything. I came here to talk about my book, and you've spent the entire time trying to tear me down for God knows what reason. What did I ever do to you? It's not about you personally, Janet said, though her tone suggested otherwise. It's about what you represent. It's about a generation of men who've never had to answer for their privilege, who've never had to actually examine their role in perpetuating inequality. My role? Michael was furious now, his voice booming across the studio. I grew up poor, I worked my backside off for everything I have, and I've tried to be a decent person my whole life. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by you about privilege when you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Oh, here we go with the I was poor story again, Janet said dismissively, waving her hand. Being poor doesn't give you a free pass to ignore every other form of privilege you've had. You're a man in a male-dominated industry. You've had opportunities that women could only dream of. And that's my fault? Michael shot back. I didn't create the system, Janet. I've just tried to survive in it like everyone else. Survive? Janet laughed bitterly. You've done more than survive, Michael. You've thrived. You've become a millionaire many times over, and the least you could do is acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, your gender had something to do with that. Michael's jaw was clenched so tight you could see the muscles working. I acknowledge that the industry has problems. I acknowledge that women have faced discrimination. What I don't acknowledge is your right to sit there and blame me personally for everything that's wrong with it. The other hosts were frantically trying to cut to a commercial break, making hand signals to the producers, but Janet kept pushing. I'm not blaming you for everything. I'm asking you to take some responsibility. But clearly that's too much to ask from someone who spent his whole life being told how wonderful he is. Responsibility? Michael's voice cracked. You want me to take responsibility? For what? For being born male? For working hard and being successful? What exactly am I supposed to apologize for? For being part of the problem, Janet shouted. For never using your voice to stand up for women. For taking role after role with actresses half your age and never questioning it. For sitting back and watching women get pushed out of the industry while you kept working? That's what. Michael stared at her for a long moment, and you could see something change in his eyes. The anger was still there, but now there was disappointment too. You know what, Janet? I feel sorry for you. I really do. You're so bitter and angry that you can't even have a civil conversation with someone without turning it into an attack. I've dealt with difficult people my whole life. But you take it to a whole new level. Don't you dare patronize me, Janet hissed. Don't you dare sit there and act like you're better than me because you can keep your temper under control. That's just another way of silencing women. Making us feel like we're hysterical for being angry about legitimate issues. I'm not trying to silence you, Michael said, his voice exhausted now. I'm trying to have a conversation, but you're making that impossible. Every single thing I say, you twist it into something else. I can't win here. Maybe that's the point, Janet said coldly. Maybe it's time you didn't win for once. Maybe it's time someone held you accountable. Michael shook his head slowly. Accountable for what? For crimes you've invented in your head? For sins you've decided I'm guilty of without any evidence? This is madness. The tension in the studio was unbearable. The audience didn't know whether to clap, boo, or just sit in shocked silence. The other panelists had given up trying to intervene and were just sitting there looking horrified. And then Janet said the thing that pushed it over the edge. You know what your problem is, Michael? You're a relic. You're a dinosaur from a different era. And you can't handle the fact that the world has moved on without you. You want everyone to keep celebrating you for films you made 40 years ago. But nobody cares anymore. You're irrelevant. The words hung in the air like poison. Michael's face went pale, then red, then pale again. His hands were shaking. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at Janet like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Then, without warning, he reached up and ripped the microphone off his jacket. That's it, he said, his voice quiet but absolutely final. I'm done. I don't have to sit here and take this rubbish from you or anyone else. Oh, what a surprise, Janet said mockingly. The big man can't handle the heat, so he's running away. How predictable. I'm not running away, Michael said, his voice shaking with rage. I'm refusing to participate in whatever sick game you're playing. You didn't invite me here for an interview. You invited me here to humiliate me, and I won't give you the satisfaction. He threw the microphone down on the chair with such force it bounced onto the floor. The sound echoed through the studio, and everyone jumped. You want to talk about respect? You want to talk about treating people decently? Take a long look in the mirror, Janet, because you don't know the first thing about either of those things. How dare you, Janet started. But Michael cut her off. No, how dare you, he said, pointing at her. How dare you invite someone onto your show and treat them like garbage? How dare you make assumptions about who I am and what I believe without knowing anything about me? And how dare you use serious issues like sexism and inequality as weapons to score cheap points on television? Janet stood up now too, her face red with anger. Don't you lecture me about sexism. Don't you bloody dare. I've lived through it. I've fought against it my whole life. And I won't be told by some privileged actor that I'm using it as a weapon. Then stop acting like you're the only person who's ever faced adversity, Michael shouted back. Stop acting like your experience is the only one that matters. You don't have a monopoly on suffering, Janet. The security guards were starting to move toward the set now, clearly worried that things were about to get physical. The producers were screaming into their headsets, trying to figure out what to do. The other panelists had actually moved their chairs back, creating distance from the confrontation. And the audience was on their feet, some cheering, some booing, everyone recording on their phones. Get out then, Janet yelled, her voice cracking. If you can't handle a real conversation, if you can't handle being challenged, Then get the hell off my show. Oh, don't worry, Michael said, already walking toward the edge of the set. I'm going. I wouldn't stay here another second if you paid me. And you know what? I've met a lot of difficult people in my time. But you, Janet, you're something else. You're not brave for attacking me. You're not heroic for being rude. You're just bitter and mean, and I feel sorry for anyone who has to work with you. Good riddance, Janet shouted after him. We don't need has-beens on this show anyway. Michael stopped in his tracks and turned around one last time. Has been? I've won 2 Academy Awards. I've worked with the greatest directors in the world. I've had a career most actors can only dream of. And you know what? I did it by being professional and treating people with respect. 2 things you clearly know nothing about. Oh, piss off, Janet yelled, completely losing it now. Take your Academy Awards and your precious career and piss off. Gladly, Michael said coldly. He turned to the audience and gave them a small, sad smile. I'm sorry you had to witness this, folks. This isn't what I wanted. And with that, he walked off the set. His head held high despite everything. You could hear his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence of the studio. The other panelists sat frozen, not knowing what to do. Janet was still standing, breathing heavily, her face red and her hands clenched into fists. The audience was in absolute chaos. Some people crying, some people shouting, everyone in shock. The cameras kept rolling as Michael disappeared through the exit door. And that was it. One of Britain's most beloved actors, driven off a television show by one of the most uncomfortable confrontations anyone had ever seen. The door swung shut behind him with a final, definitive bang that seemed to sum up the whole horrible situation. The show had imploded, burned to the ground in less than an hour, and everyone who watched it would never forget what they'd seen.